very informal. If you have questions, you're welcome to interrupt them in the middle of it. You know, raising your hand or signaling that you want to speak is better than a small handgun.
Even Behringer?
Even. So these both should work, and they should work fine. So, and I'll give you guys. Well, actually, I'll hold on to this. Okay.
Yeah.
So, which of you would like to start to talk about strategy in general?
Well, I need to go after Paul since we're both talking about duotrope, and he's got more material on that. So,
okay.
Whichever order we do, I have to go after Paul.
Okay. Or Marion, do you want to go first? What do you want to do?
Well, you want to talk about duotrope? I have some things to say about it.
Well, whoever wants to start.
Go ahead and start.
Well, Paul is the handouts on duotrope.
Okay.
So perhaps that should go
So,
first. But
okay,
it's up to you.
then-
It's up to you.
Okay.
Is this okay? Can you hear me?
No, louder. Closer to your mouth.
Okay. How about now?
Better.
Okay. Well, I didn't prepare anything special about duotrope, but I have used them quite often in making submissions. They've recently changed what they do, and you now have to pay $5 a month for their extended service. It used to be free, and then they started changing it, and now it's $5
This one works louder.
for a much more expanded version of it. Let me see what I said about it.
The question over there?
So, okay, we have questions.
Wait.
That's really fast. That's you barely let them talk.
I didn't hear what they were talking about as far as
Duotrope.
Okay. So it used to be free. Now you pay $5 a month if
So
you want
what
the
is-
expanded version.
They want to know what duotrope is.
I'm sorry. It's a site that gives a listing. They say of about 5,000 potential markets for you to submit your work to. And as I said, it used to be free. Now, what they give you is which sites are newly open, which sites are closed, which are defunct now, interviews with the editor, themes that they're looking for, response times, rejection and exception percentages. So it gives you a lot of valuable information. The free version is much shorter.
So Duotrope is an online system that you can use to.
I just want to know the spelling of it. Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead.
duotrope.com. Not anymore? Okay, so yeah, Duotrope used to be the main site. There's Raylan.com, RALAN.com. Is mostly science fiction, fantasy, a little bit of horror. Then there's also the Submission Grinder, which is now the free version of Duotrope, or like another. It popped up because Duotrope became a pay site. So that's Diabolical Plots, I think. If you put in Submission Grinder, it comes right up. I have this worksheet that I made, which tells you a few submission terms. It tells you the length of It tells you the length from flash fiction all the way to novel. What token payment is. So I'm just going to leave those right up here.
Do you want me to start handing
you
those
can,
out?
Yeah, you can hand them out. So the main thing when you submit stuff is patience, right? Like editors, they take forever to get back to you. It took me 5 years to get the story in this book published. And I had another story. It got into the book, and then the book got canceled and moved to another editor, and then my story didn't get in that version. And that was 3 years. So patience, persistence, yeah, and finding the right market. Like my story is about vampires. So this humorous vampire market was perfect, even though it only pays royalties. So sometimes you can't always find a market that pays what you want, but that also is good for your story. Like I could have put this in a normal horror market, but it might not have made it. and also this book, it now has a copy on Amazon for $999. So all you people that bought it before, I need to adjust the price a little bit. And I have a couple available for $15 if you want the discount.
Question.
What was that other site you mentioned? Raylan, right?
Raylan.com. RALAN.com.
So does everyone understand why there's a purpose behind these systems, or is that still a question for you? Okay. Why don't you guys talk to why a system? Why not just mail things out? And why would you use a system and actually pay for a system?
First off, let me say, sending things out for submission really sucks. All right? Almost everyone here has limits on their time. You only have, say, between the time you get home and if you don't watch any television, the time you have to go to sleep to write. So maybe you've got 5 hours, maybe you've got 4, maybe you only have a half hour. Who wants to spend that time looking for some place to send your story to? No one wants to do that. So this is not a fun thing to do to begin with. Sites like Duotrope and Submissions Grinder make it much, much easier. I go back before the internet. I was getting published in 1990. I used to go to the library and pick up magazines and look at them and say, gee, this magazine looks like a decent market for a story I've written, or maybe just an idea I have for a story. And then I'd copy down the information and so on, and send that to them by mail. My rule was if I send out 8 letters a week, 1 of them will get lost, and I'll never hear anything from them. Of the remaining 7, 6 of them will come back with a no, and 1 of them will come back with a yes, and will take me a month to get those responses. The internet does this all a lot faster. One way we did it faster back then was that Writer's Market used to come out with a book every year. It was this thick, and it cost a lot of money. They finally topped off, I think, at $50. But they only came out with 1 a year, and by the time they published it, because there's always a lot of movement among editors and magazines, it was obsolete before it even got published. But it was certainly better than nothing. It was better than going to the library and looking at magazines. Now we have online versions of them, like Duotrope and Submissions Grinder, where everything you could have in the Writer's Market yearbook is available to you online. Now, in addition to finding sources, finding places you can send your articles to, Duotrope, and I don't know if Submissions Grinder does this as well, has a tracking system for you. Back in the day when you were sending out letters, yeah, you got screwed up quite a bit. You'd forget what you'd sent out unless you kept very careful notes and so on. Nowadays, there is a grid that comes out with Duotrope, and you can put all the information on there. This is the magazine I sent it to. I sent it on this date. On this date, they sent me an acknowledgement saying that yes, they had received it. On this date, they finally came to a decision. What's the current status of it? What was the decision? How did I physically send it? It's almost all electronic nowadays. There's only one place I send to by mail, which is kind of a newspaper thing called Funny Times. And there's also a place for notes. So all that information is on there. It would actually be nice to have more information, but I'll get to something that they're missing later. So these are things that something like Duotrope makes much easier for you. Gary, what was the original question we were talking before I started guessing on?
Well, I think it was, what is it? What's the purpose? Why would you use an online system? And I think you answered it, which is because if you had to do all that stuff,
How many people have done that? How many people have gone through the process of going through magazines? Okay, so if your life could be a little easier because you had some other application that was already telling you when you plug in, okay, I write flash fiction, and they eliminate all the stuff that you don't apply because it's not the right format. Wouldn't it make sense to do that, even if it wasn't tracking for you, even if it was just telling you these are the right places in general that publish your stuff? And so I think what you're saying is, but it comes with a bonus, right? If you look at it that way, and it tracks everything you do. So how many people have ever gotten confused mailing stuff out and not remembering who you mailed what to? Oh my God, you're geniuses. I get confused getting up in them. So, and if Tony, talk a little bit about, or any of you, talk about the fact that do you mail the same story to more than one place at a time? Okay, go ahead, Marion. Use the microphone because your voice is softer.
Okay, my process is I take the same story, find a fit for it in maybe 5 different places. The site has to accept simultaneous submissions, though. I mean, you can't just, submit the same one all over the place. So I submit it. Some of them will regulate you and say you can only send it to us. Then they take 3 months to get back to you, so if you can then submit to someone else. But I send it to 5 places where I think it would be a good fit.
So that's a strategy, Paul. Tony, what are your strategies for how you do this to get published?
Okay, so I find like 3 to 5 markets that pay. Usually, I go for over 2 cents a word because I don't like to give my stuff away for free, really. And they're depressingly hard to find.
Yes.
Money's tight, and if you go for professional markets, and especially in sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, like you're up against the professional short story writers, so it's even narrower. You guys are never going to submit now. Keep telling you all this depressing stuff, but I mean, it's really hard, to find. It's hard to find good markets, and then once you find them, you can't. They all don't want simultaneous submissions. They hate that because then what happens is, the second market you send it to, they buy the story. When they were going to buy the story, when the first market was going to buy it, but they were just a little slower in sending you an acceptance, which happens. So you find 3 to 5 markets that you want to send it to. Take the top one, whatever one you like the best, whatever one you think fits the best first, send it there first. If you don't get an acceptance there, if you get a rejection, then take the piece, turn it right back around, and send it back out to the second market. Now, if the editor, by some, rejections are usually form letters. So if you get comments, that's really good. It's really good. It's like rare. So then what you want to do, you want to take those comments, you want to edit the story, and then send it back out to another market unless that editor has asked to see it again, which sometimes they do, but again, not very often. So you just keep sending it until you get a yes. Or if you get to 5, rejections, there's a place called the Rejected Quarterly. So you can send your story there, and you have to send them the 5 rejections along with it, so don't delete them. But there's a place that even takes, stories that get rejected 5 times.
Did you make that up?
No, it's seriously there. Yeah.
When you say the word market, can you talk a little bit about what that means, what markets are in terms of writing? How broad are they, or how narrow?
So most Duotrope is mostly short story markets. They do have some novel stuff, but that's a whole another world. So
Poetry too.
right, they have poetry. So they have anthology markets, which is people who produce books like this, like the mainline book. Online markets, which are magazines that only publish stories online. Then there's print magazines, still a few. Not too many, but not in horror and fantasy, and like Apex is still there. But so that's what I mean, like places where your story would be, where you could submit it, and then it would be hopefully accepted. The nice thing about Duotrope is it has statistics that tell you like how long generally it takes the market to get back to you. So anywhere between like 0 and 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Like Tor.com is like a year. So you send that story off to Tor.com and then you forget it exists for at least a year.
So you've got, you're going to send to 5 different markets, and you've got a year possibly between each one. So it could take 5 years to get one thing.
Yep. That's why you keep writing. That's why you keep submitting. Jane?
Can you give an example of a good comment?
Sure, I can. I had a story that was sent back saying that I liked the story, but I felt that it dropped off in the second half. If you want to resubmit it and work on the second half, we'd be happy to look at it again. So this shows that the editor really liked the story and they're interested in seeing it again if I want to work on it. Now, I had sent that story out to 5 different places and eventually someplace else picked it up, so I didn't have to rework it. But that's a good comment. The editor actually read the whole story. They didn't just look at the first line and said, and hit the button that sent a form rejection letter out. They actually read the story, took the time to make a comment, and said that they would look at it again if I made these changes.
I think I would probably recognize that as a good comment.
Okay.
Can you think of any that would be a little more oblique that would also be good?
Just the fact that they've read the whole story is good.
Okay. Thank you.
I could give you one. A while ago, I submitted it was a piece of literary criticism to a journal, and the editor sent back. They said, "Hey, we liked your story, but you're a little bit too familiar with the one author. It's not right for us." So that led me to think, hey, it's not bad, but it's not right for this magazine or this journal or what have you. Carol, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, I mean, to do Excel, but at everydayfiction.com, we don't take sim subs, but the good news is you get maybe 3 or 4 eyes on every story. We accept, reject, every single story we read through. That's at least a set of editor's eyes. And we give a chance at rewrites, and if I hope Boulder doesn't mind that I accepted the story. It was Walters, and I haven't been here in a while. I'm like, God, his name sounds really familiar. I read the story, and I was so happy to go into the bio section, and it was this story. So, I'm just, we try to really encourage authors, but we will get feedback on every single story we accept and reject.
So Paul's strategy is to send one at a time, right?
Well,
Send it to one. Get feedback, send it to the next, and send it to the next, and send it to the next. How about the other 2 of you? Your strategy may differ from that, because you talked about simultaneous submissions, but use
I wouldn't live that long to be able to send them one and wait for a response and then send another one. I just skip the sites that demand that you will only send to them, and then it would take years. So, and I don't have that many.
Question. When one site accepts your work, do you notify the other one?
Yeah, that's part of being polite, and people, I think they really appreciate it because they don't want to accept it later, and then you tell them, oh, it's already been published.
So Marion, can you put some metrics to what you do? Can you tell us how many you send to simultaneously, how far apart? If you do that, can you?
What do you mean by how far apart?
Can you give us an example of your typical strategy that involves numbers?
Oh, well. By the way, this is my super duper submission list. Only one page of about 6 where it tells you the day you sent it, and it's just a simple table. But you really need to track who you sent, what to, and if they accept it or not.
Is that something you did yourself, or was that generated on Duotrope?
Excuse me?
Is that something you did yourself?
Yeah, it's just a word table with about 6 columns on it. I'm kind of low tech, so
But the same story, how many times do you submit that within what time period? Are you submitting all 5 on the same day?
I might do it the same day. Another thing to think about is sometimes I'll write something one day and I think it's the greatest thing I ever wrote. And I want to send it out right then. But the next day, it's not so good. I mean, I changed it. I mean, it's okay, but I wanted to change some words around and add a few sentences here and there, and it's better. But still don't send it out. Then maybe a week later, I look at it again and do my final editing of it, and then I send it out. I always find it's a mistake to send it out right away. I mean, it might be great, but there's always little tweaks you want to do to it, and you're never really finished. But, yeah, is that
Okay,
what you
so
meant?
to contrast, Tony, give us some metrics behind it.
My goal is always to have 25 stories out there, or 25 submissions. Okay? That's really just 5 stories sent to 5 different places, if each of them can have multiple submissions. Generally, I mix it up. I'll have, say, 4 or 5 stories out there in one form or another, and then I'll pick 1 or 2 stories sent to some place that does not accept multiple submissions. But I'd really like to get into that particular market, either because it's prestigious or because that market pays well. So at the moment, I have a science fiction story out to Orson Scott Card's Intergalactic Medicine Show. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. That's, a magazine that has a certain amount of cachet to it. They've been sitting on it long enough that I'm about to send them a message saying, if you're not interested, I'm going to pull the story. It's no longer available, and send it someplace else.
How long is that time?
It depends upon the market whether or not they have a specific statement. However, one of the nice things, again, about Duotrope is that they will have a column that says the average number of days until a response is, let's say it's 3 months. Duotrope will also keep track that after a certain amount of time past that, so when it gets to 6 months, they'll have a note coming up in red to make sure you notice it. That not only has this been, for the usual amount of time, it's well over the usual amount of time. In general, 6 months is a good amount of time to get back to an editor and bug them about the story. Very often editors change. Very often they've been overwhelmed. And honestly, I've been on the receiving end of things like this. And if you have other responsibilities at a magazine, then reading from the slush pile, which is basically what this is always your last priority. There's more important things to do. You got to get the editing done. You got to get the magazine out or up online. You've got to deal with whatever money is involved. Those are always more important and more imminent problems than whatever people have sent you. When we say the slush pile, we're talking about submissions sent to you by people whom you do not know. Which leads to another issue I'd like to mention. Each year I have a particular goal. 2 years ago was just to get published fiction, because I'd been a nonfiction writer for years, was just to get as much of my fiction published as possible. Didn't matter whether I made anything. Last year was try only to get published and make some money. Well, most of the time I made $5 or $10, but at least it was something. I made an exception if it was a charity or an editor that I happened to know. This year's goal is, this is the year of sucking up to editors. When I was in nonfiction, I'd gotten myself to the point where editors phoned me and said, I have an issue and I like your writing, would you write a story for me? Or would you write an article? That's what I want to do this year. To have enough editors like me that when they have an article, or when they need an article or a story for their magazine, for their website, or their anthology, they contact me. A lot of the best paid things are never put out there for submissions. An editor, especially for an anthology, will just call people they know will do a good job and say, can you write me a story for this?
And I want to come back to that. That's your strategy in the year of sucking up.
Yes.
Right. How about the two of you? Do you have an overall strategy for this year, or is your strategy the same as it's been? And what is that overall strategy?
My strategy, because it worked, nobody could be more surprised than I am when I got quite a few things published. So I just stick with that. The other thing I wanted to mention about Duotrope is they also give you a percentage of acceptances. So if they accept 1/10 of 1% of the things they're sent, you don't want to send it there. You have to be realistic. If they accept 10 or 15% of what they're sent, then I'll do that. But not when they have 1/10 of 1%. So the odds are.
Duotrope will even rank publications saying this is one of the 25 most difficult markets to break into. This is one of the 25 most personable markets, where the editor's more liable to send you a personal note, even if they reject it, and so on.
I'm headed to World Horror Convention in Atlanta in about 6 to 8 weeks. It's in May. I'm actually working on 2 novels to pitch there, so I'm not really doing much with short stories at the moment. I'm desperately trying to finish those novels.
So, and that background's pretty important. What you don't know about Marion is, Marion, over the past couple of years, how many pieces have you had published? Just estimate.
About 80.
80.
Now they're short. They're not,
No, they're completed pieces that have been chosen to be published by places that reject plenty of people.
Mm-hmm.
So when Marion puts up her spreadsheet and says, well, I'm not very high tech, right? And she's doing it on a spreadsheet, she already has a whole list of publications that she's going back to publish her next piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could use Duotrope for just the research portion and not use it for the tracking, or you could use it for the tracking if that's the way you roll, as my son says, if that's the way you roll. But 80 pieces is pretty successful. So part of that is because she's a good writer, right? Because no one's going to publish you 80 times if you're not. But part of it has to do with strategy.
Marion, I was wondering, since you've published so many, do you go back to the same publishers? Like, now that you're known to them, do they seem to accept your work more, or you're not like in a slush pile
if
anymore?
If it fits into what they want.
Okay.
And that's the other thing. They really have to follow their guidelines on the type of story they accept. If you want to, but after they know you a little bit, it's a little easier.
It got easier for you then?
Do you submit the same, like if one story is accepted, do you submit that to after it's published? Do you
another issue.
That's always
every publication, every website has some sort of agreement saying we're going to publish this and we get 6 months exclusivity or a year exclusivity. You don't want to let your work go to some place that owns all rights. That's stupid, okay? You're giving your entire story away for the rest of your life. So one thing I wish Duotrope did was I wish it kept track of what rights you sold and that had it popped up somewhere on the site, on the grid, saying this is now available to send out again. I have sold articles multiple times to various sources. I may have tweaked them a little bit to fit that particular source. But an example, I wrote an article on, I was paid very well to write an article about airport medical clinics. That was done to a magazine that was distributed to doctors in their last year of internship. That was the only market, but think of how many counties and states there are without enough doctors. They all put ads in. This magazine had a lot of money. But one odd thing they wanted was they wanted to know how much the doctors made at each of those medical clinics. So some doctors would give me an exact figure, some doctors wouldn't. I just put that information in. Now, when I resold that article to something else, a general interest magazine, obviously I deleted the information about what those doctors make. That's really of no one's business except other doctors.
I do want to point out, at the Wilmington Writers Group, we had one lady come, and she said she sold the same article, was it 27?
Yeah.
27 times. Which is why all of this is very significant, because maybe you don't have that article that you can sell 27 times. Maybe you're only going to ever be able to sell it once. But if that lady had said that, she wouldn't have sold it 27 times. And she talks about getting cash for it every single time. So that's important. Carol, do you need a microphone?
No. One thing you want to be aware of is if you're if you're sending something online or whatever, if you working as an editor for Everyday Fiction, we see a lot of this. If you post it on your Facebook page, if you post your story on any site that doesn't require a password,
right,
it's considered published. So if you're in a writer's group online and there's no password to get in, it's considered previously published. And so we won't accept it. Most magazines won't accept it because it's considered published. That's the general rule. So you just want to be careful. A lot of people say, oh, well, it was just posted at my website. It's still published because everybody can see it. So.
Right. Some places will take reprints, but you don't get you get a different pay scale. It's not however many cents a word.
Yeah, at our site it's considered previously published, and really most places want unpublished.
Yeah, unpublished stuff. Yeah.
So if it's an open site,
if it's an open site that doesn't require a password, it's considered published online.
Go ahead.
Tony, I want to get back to the year of sucking up.
Sure.
And I admire the way you're going about your goals and achieving them. And I just like to get to the year of sucking up too and forget the other stuff. But what are you doing differently this year in order to achieve that goal than you did last year to achieve the other goal?
One thing is I'm going to try to get to more conventions this year because you get to meet editors and so on in person. I only got to 2 conventions last year. I work on the weekends, so it's difficult for me to get away. Conventions are almost always either on the weekends or a whole week long for like a Worldcon or something and end on the weekend. In addition to that, I just sent a note to a magazine, something that's published a story of mine. In fact, it's online right now. If you go to 4starstories.com, that's 4, number 4, there's a science fiction story of mine on there. And you could, by all means, please take a look. Even if you don't read it, just the fact that you clicked on it counts as a hit. Now, I sent another story to that same editor. And when I sent it, I mentioned first, you published me already, just to remind them. Then that I've done everything I could to promote the story, and I hope it's getting a good number of hits, which is what they want to hear. And then this is the new story that I think would fit with your magazine. They sent back a response right away, within 1 day, much quicker than they responded the first time. And said, yes, it's getting a good number of hits, thank you, we'll consider it for this issue. The next issue is already full. What else am I doing? Something that Jonathan Mayberry mentioned, the virtual panel discussion. When you go to a convention, you see panels of writers or editors or agents up there, and people ask a question and all the agents or writers, whoever is on the panel, answers the question. The virtual panel discussion is done all by email, so you never meet the other people. So several times I have contacted the editor of the magazine that's publishing one of my stories saying, I'd like to do this. You don't have to send me the emails of all the other writers, but if I send the questions to you, will you forward them to the other writers? And they'll either get back to me or they won't. Usually between 1/3 and 1/2 of the other writers will respond to me. Basically, if you got 4 people, that's enough for a panel discussion. And then you take everyone's response and put them together as if they were all sitting next to each other, all answering the same question at the same time. If they're really dull responses, they don't get much of a presence in it. And I post that on my blog. So again, it's more promotion for each other. And then in the process, we exchange emails and click on each other's Facebook page or that sort of thing. So I've also made connections with other writers. But the point is to do something that will promote the publication and connect me with other authors.
So Tony gave us his strategy. Paul, you gave us your strategy because you're focusing. Marion, did you give us your overall strategy? Did you?
Well, it was kind
do
of
you have one?
Well,
That you?
It was kind of in pieces that I gave it to you.
So how would you sum it up, though? How would you sum up your overall strategy today? You can't, it can't be 3 years ago because it may have been different.
Persistence, finding the right fit, writing something decent, writing every day. I know it's easier for me because I'm retired, but for instance, in 2014, there was a lot going on in family drama and physical illness, so I didn't write as much. But I figured I'm going to be here today. I better write something this morning. It would be hypocritical. So this is example, I guess, of what I do. Like kind of every day I sit down at that computer, and I don't have to be inspired by anything. In fact, if I waited for inspiration, I'd probably, not ever get anything out unless something unusual really happened that day. So, for instance, this is what I wrote in like 3 minutes this morning. It took a full 30 minutes before Jessica sensed that her husband George was dead. There he was, a lump at the edge of their king-size bed, curled up and still. There had been so much distance between them lately that a wedge had grown along the center of the mattress. No one dared or cared enough to trespass. Jess pinched George's big toe. Nothing. She leaned closer to see his face. His baby blues were open and icy. Jess was unable to move, glued to the floor with fear that he might be alive. So, I don't know if I'll ever do anything with that or add it to something or ignore it, but it kind of gets my brain going in that direction. So that's one of the things.
But I want to bring you back to something else, very specific. Your strategy is not, I want to make as much money as possible at this, right?
I've made $20 so far.
So that's not part of your core strategy, but your core strategy appears to be get published, get published, get published.
Yeah, well, what happened was one of the earliest pieces I wrote, which I called The Accidental Florist, got published, and it was one of the first things I wrote. And so it was like gambling. You go to a casino, you get one payoff, so you want to keep doing it. So I just kept pushing along because of that simple reward that I thought would never, ever happen.
But that's a really important point, because both Paul and Tony have told you that they're now going after markets that pay. That's their strategy. That's their goal. Marion's goal is different, and it's okay to have your own goal. My question for each of you is, if you thought about it, how many of you have actually put into a couple words what your goal is? You may have it, but have you put into the words that you can actually follow it every single time you do it, or have you not done that yet? And would that benefit you if you did it? Do you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share with everyone else?
I'm going to take your question and turn it to what I want it to be.
There you go. That's the definition of a writer, isn't it?
Yeah. And a politician. I think it's very important to do that. My goal as a poetaster, poet wannabe, is to publish poems in journals that have a subscription over, say, 1,000. Simple as that. the challenge that I have with that, and this is where I turn it to my question instead of yours.
Good.
Back to all of you. If I do, going back to days of writer's market, if I look through the writer's market, I read the magazines and journals, I throw out the ones that really aren't a fit, I'm left with hundreds. If I wanted to make money, I'd probably have negative numbers, but since I'm not looking for money, there are hundreds. What do? Do you just grab a handful and start submitting? Do you spend time refining it? How do you approach that?
Well, if you are on Duotrope, then if there are hundreds of potential markets came up, I would find some other search information, such as the highest to lowest in pay, rank them that way. The ones that respond most quickly, that's another very valid thing to do. Most personable, I don't know if that would be something you care that much about. The most difficult to get into, you might want to rank those and decide if you want the challenge of breaking into them, or maybe you'll put it, you could put the rankings from top to bottom or bottom to top, so you can put the most difficult at the bottom and not get to them. So in Duotrope, those are ways that you can limit your search.
Banks have a way of collecting as much money from you as possible. And the way they do it is they process the checks in order so that you're likely to bounce the most, whatever checks come in, they figured out the order they can do that so they can bounce the most number of checks on you. So if you have a lot of low amount checks and some high amount checks, they clear the high amount check first and then try and bounce many of the low checks. Part of your strategy might be, well, I'm going to go for the shortest term turnaround, right? Start submitting to those like crazy. Then I'll take the slower ones and do those later as I've got a news story that's going through those faster ones, instead of taking the ones that take the longest, because theoretically that would take you a lot less time to get through all those places if you do them in the right order. So that may be another way that you choose what order you do things in.
There are some oddities about some of these lists, and you need something like Duotrope to give you that information. The one that comes to mind, for those of you who write mysteries, you may recall there are two digest-sized mystery magazines that have been around forever. One's called the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, the other's the Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine. They look almost identical. The material in them is very, very similar. But for some reason, Ellery Queen responds rather quickly. Alfred Hitchcock Magazine, the editorial staff is a complete mess and takes over a year to respond. Why, when they're published by the same people, no one knows.
Because Alfred Hitchcock is dead.
So's Ellery Queen never existed. Yes. He was
that inherently is faster if you don't exist.
Right, yeah.
Would you ever put in the submission letter that you're submitting it to multiple markets?
Oh yes, you
Would
should
that,
do that every
rush
time.
them a little bit
Just
more?
the words. This is a simultaneous submission.
Okay.
That's you don't do that, Paul?
No, I mean, it won't make them go any faster.
No.
Nothing makes them go faster.
Well, it's just that they're prepared for the fact that you might get accepted somewhere
Right,
else.
that's the important part.
And as far as what you asked, Walter, about what I do is that when I decide what maybe 10 I might submit to, I go to that site and I read some of the stories already on there, poetry on there, and then I can get a feel for the kind of style they like, and that's how I decide which ones to send to, and the hundreds. But it takes a lot of time.
Something else I could mention. Every one of these on their website says, please read our magazine and decide if your work is right for us. Nobody does that.
I do.
Who's got the time to do that? However, apparently Marion does that.
Well, they want you to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll look at it. I'll scan through it, but I don't have time to read every story. Now, when all else fails, then buy it and read the magazine, okay? I've been wanting to break into Needle. Needle is a crime magazine, noir, mystery. Several people I know, including Dennis DeFoya and Tom Joyce, have had stories in Needle. Best mystery stories of the year, often selects from Needle. So this is, even though it looks kind of cartoonish, this is a prestigious magazine in its field. They have rejected me twice. So I decided, okay, I'll buy some copies and read the damn thing. What I've actually learned is that they like the only thing I've learned, really, aside from the fact they want very good stories, is that they like a geographic spread. They don't want, there are a dozen stories in this magazine. They don't want more than one in New York. They want from all over the country and different environments and different characters and so on. So I will have to expand the sort of stories that I write about.
Yes, go.
Sorry. Tony, you mentioned your blog, and I don't know if anybody else has a blog, but how do you use or not use your blog in relation with your work?
I'm really bad at blogging. If I get one post a month, I'm pretty happy with that. I post on Twitter quite a bit more. But many websites that publish your work, online magazines they prefer to be called, will publish the name of your site. And in fact, I think even something like this, a print magazine like Needle, will put, at the end, yes, it'll have the picture of the author and a little description of them, and you can contact him or you can read his blog at such and such a place. So most magazines nowadays will post some sort of note about your blog. I don't know, does that answer your question?
A little bit, but not exactly. Like, how do you use, you say you don't blog much, but let's say you did, or maybe you blog, or Marion blogs, or how do you use the blog to promote your work? Do you talk about your work on the blog?
I do the virtual panel discussions and put them on the blog, usually splitting them up because people don't like to read blog posts of more than 500 words. So a single panel discussion will get me 2 or 3 blog posts. Aside from that, I respect people like Carrie Gans, who put, what does she have? The author's quill, is that the name of it? Every single week put out a blog post. But I could never do that. 2, the world is lousy with writers posting about writing, and I don't know that we necessarily need another one of those. Almost all agents have a blog nowadays, and I subscribe to a lot of them. I read almost none of them, but it's good to have subscribed to it so that they can see, they might recognize my name if and when I contact them later on. I'll read Marie Lamba's blog post, which comes out every Monday, because I know Marie. She was actually a guest here and spoke to us. But I'm not sure I can really give you a good answer because I don't feel that that's an area that I do a particularly good job of using my blog to promote myself. I don't have a lot of followers.
What about websites? I hear they're very important in promoting your work, but I wonder just for someone that's not getting a lot of acceptances and they just don't have a whole lot to say. They have some published works, but just how important is it for authors to have a website? Because it seems like a lot of these submissions want your website. They'll ask for your website.
I think you can get away with just having a blog and using that as your website until you get to be a very, very famous author.
But you list on there all your published works, like, this was accepted by Yankee Magazine, this was accepted by some, and the date that it's accepted. Do you put all your credentials on that, or do you just say I've been published in Yankee Magazine and...
Yeah, I probably should. I do not.
Okay.
When Marion's very lazy website creator works
Scary.
actually works for her, which is me. She does list all of them, and they're all
List
accessible.
all of them, even if it's a duplicate submission.
No. Not if it's.
Oh, now you're talking about two different things here. You're talking about when you submit
Right.
a story, do you list everything?
Right,
No,
on your
no,
website.
no. Well,
No.
no. I mean, again, what does the website have to do with the submission? They're two
She
different
tied
things.
it together in the end, Tony, by
Okay.
saying that sometimes they're interested in that because they want to see evidence that you're worthy of being
Yeah,
read.
it would
Mhm.
You're
say,
worthy of
you know,
being-
do you have a website? It seems like that, I'm fine, you have a lot. It says, do you have a website? And there's a place for your website there, and I'm assuming that,
Mhm.
they want to see the work that you do and so.
Generally, you know, my understanding is that most editors say, yeah, that's fine, your bio, the other place you've been published and so on, but if it ain't on the page, you know,
Okay, but in
they're
your
going to
bio,
judge you
that
on the
should be enough.
basis of that particular submission.
Okay.
I mean, everybody's got good work and bad work. I've been sending out some of my bad work lately because I've been working on a novel and haven't written as many short stories lately. So I've been digging out some stories that I never managed to place to begin with and sending those out. So, I mean, it's not embarrassing to me, but when I look at it again, I say, there isn't that much there. I mean, there isn't really a big surprise or a moral to this. It's, you know.
Well, my name is Marion Brooks, and I am blogless. I don't have a blog. I do have a website that Gary very generously helps me with, and I find that when I submit things, sometimes people will say, "Oh, I went into your web and I saw what you wrote. I really liked it. You know, family going there." You know, I feel like it's a good thing to have. Well, I put all my published things in there. The things I'm still working on.
Strategy, I mean, everyone's talked about strategy. My strategy for the few things I submitted was that I went to Marion's website and I said, oh, here's a lot of publications that actually accept someone. And I started picking them off and looking. What I did was I looked at where she had submitted, what she had submitted, and those publications, and started saying, okay, I'm going to do this. And so 50-word stories was one of those that I had 3 pieces accepted pretty fast, too. And it was because I used that as my do-a-trope. I used Marion's acceptances as my personal do. Well, she doesn't feel like she's competing with me, and I don't feel like I'm competing with her. So, but there are lots of strategies. I come back to, I'm a marketing guy, and so if I were to give you one piece of advice, it would be go back to Billy Crystal and Jack Palance, where Jack Palance goes, you need that one thing, right? He's sticking that big finger in your face. You really need to know what your goal is out of all this. These 3 have very clearly defined goals. And that helps drive what efforts they're going to make and where they're going to target publishing their works. And the thing I would tell each of you is, as a writer, you want to have that. Because if you don't have that, you'll be all over the place. And you won't be as effective. It's not that that's a terrible thing, but you won't be as focused, you won't be as effective, because you won't have one strategy, you'll be actually operating 5 strategies. But they'll interfere with each other. Because if what you want is to get published, and it isn't about the money, it's about the recognition, then you get to make some decisions. Like Walter said, then you get to make some decisions about, well, being published where is the most important to me? It's publications with over 1,000 subscribers. So for Walter, it's not about being published anywhere. It's about being published where it'll actually be read. For some people, by the way, and it's not a wrong thing, it's just to get the publishing credit. Some of us go to college, and that's all we want. We don't care what courses we took. We just want that piece of paper when we get out so we can show an employer. So one of the most important things you can do, and the reason we did this was kind of to emphasize that point, you want a strategy, and that strategy has to be based on some goals that you can put down and say in just a couple words. Because if you can't do that, then you probably don't have it, or not as mapped out as you thought it was. Does anyone here have a strategy that they want to share with the group that is either the same or different, and why it works for you? Okay, Bev, try this.
Mine is, I don't think they need that.
Okay.
My strategy is very different. I don't have a website. I don't blog. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Twitter. I'm on nothing. But there's, professionally is the reason why I don't have it for what I do during the day. And my goal isn't to just see where I can get published, it's really to get published in credible places. So this has been a process where I've written professionally and worked at it to get published, and then began to work with people who really have some good ideas and are kind of knowing which way to go. And I followed some of their leads, and I also work with an editor at times. And will only submit something if it's really good, and I'm choosy where I submit it. But also, I can be selective enough in some specialty areas to publish because of having the credentials for it. So that's another option.
Bev, are you writing specifically? There's two ways to look at that. One is you're writing a piece that's more general and you're looking for a place to publish it, or you know where you're going to publish. It's that one magazine and you're writing specifically for that. Or do you do both with different pieces?
It depends what I'm writing. Say something in general, maybe a short story, a piece of nonfiction. I have some general ideas where it can be published and where it's a good market. And then we'll read one or two of the stories, make sure that the piece that I have is very polished and very good, and then submit it. So in fact, what I just submitted and got the contract for was the only place I submitted it to. But it was really a well-written story.
Was it written almost specifically for them?
Yes and no. It was in general. I could submit it
Okay.
somewhere else, but it just fit their criteria, what they were looking for. I have a couple of other pieces that I'm working on. It can go to a variety of different publications, but I have one in mind because it'll be the most recognition.
How about anyone else?
Do I use it?
Yeah.
No.
How about anyone else? Do you have a strategy you want to share?
What about the international market, because I'm looking at, India and Middle East, and, my stories are for a different market. I mean, it could be for US, but is there any place that I could look into for?
I know Duotrope has some. I was just looking yesterday at a Hong Kong magazine that was published in English. But as far as magazines that are published in foreign languages or languages other than English, I don't believe Duotrope covers that, and I don't know of any place that does.
No, it would be in English, but to an audience which is English speaking and reading, but it's a different audience than US.
I do not know.
Yeah.
I've found ethnic cultural groups often have a web presence that will tie you back to the publisher. Specifically for reasons to go back a ways, I was looking for an Arab audience, and if I had known more, I would have realized there's a huge Arab population in Minnesota that is very culturally active, and they had all sorts of things in journals. So.
I think with Amazon, there might be an India market also, because when you publish like on Amazon Kindle, there's different ones for each country. Like I have one that's in Spanish, and it's being sold in like Spain and like Mexico and like the Spanish-speaking market. So when you publish like through Amazon.com, you also, your book will be published like in Amazon, like UK and ES and, like all different, like Denmark, and I think there may be an India one also on there, so that you could reach like people in India through that.
How about anyone else? Do you have a strategy you'd like to share with everyone?
Oh, by the way, one other thing in regard to the international market. Nowadays, it's so much easier than it used to be now that PayPal is around. It's so much easier to get paid. I got a check from Canada drawn on a Canadian bank for a reprint of an article of mine before PayPal. And with the exchange rate, it came to like $37. And my bank wanted $25 service charge to cash or even just to accept and put it in my own account, a Canadian check. So it's PayPal makes this much easier.
So how about anyone else? Do you have a strategy? Do you have a goal? Do you have a focus?
I have a goal
Do you want
and a
this?
strategy, but I haven't tried it yet. No, I'll
Okay.
this is what I'm starting to do, and this week I was giving out free Kindle on St. Patrick's Day. And my goal is to start an open and honest conversation about how life was in Ireland, because a lot of the Irish, for instance, when I sent my book back to Ireland, they said, "Oh, don't say hunger," don't say we left because we were hungry. And I said, "Well, what should I say?" And they said, "Well, we didn't have enough to eat sometimes." My goal is to open an honest conversation about what actually went on, and I think I thankfully I can eat without depending on any money from it, but I hope I do make some money. But I found the niche, and the niche is St. Patrick's Day, Irish festivals, and so on and so forth, Irish newspapers and so on. So it doesn't cost me to give out a Kindle book, and it doesn't cost Amazon. So what I'm going to do is talk to these people at festivals and Irish bars and tell them they can have their customers download a free Kindle about Ireland, because I want the conversation to go on.
So Jerry, you're self-published, correct?
Yes.
So Jerry's strategy is clearly to get read. She just told you she doesn't depend on it. It'd be nice to make some money. But very clearly you can derive out of that what her goal is. Her goal is to get read, and she felt the best way to get read was not to go through submissions to other things, but to submit directly to the readers.
I don't know if it works yet, so I'll let you know.
Well, how many, you told me how many Twitter followers you had in a very short period of time. How many do you have?
Right now I have about 378.
Pretty
But
good.
I said to somebody at the other group, will you tell me somebody where I can go? I'll pay them if I have to learn to do Twitter. She said, I don't know, I just went on. So she said, just jump on, Jerry. So I jumped on. And I mean, before the month was out, I had 400 followers. So I was just saying to Penny, one of my biggest drawbacks was I was afraid to do things. So I think if all of you just do it, and you can learn just by doing and figure out I'm going to try this strategy. I don't know if it'll work or not. And it's not that I don't want to make money. It's just that I don't think I will. But my goal is to get the conversation open.
And that's your driving force, and that's okay. How about anyone else? Do you have a strategy or any particular tactic that you use? Jane, do you want this?
No.
Okay, no one wants this. Okay.
I'm really clear about my goal, and that is that I'm sure I have an important story to tell, particularly for my nieces and nephews, maybe my sisters and brothers. And therefore, I also think it's somewhat more, it's broader than that, possibly more universal than that. But I feel really compelled to tell my story in a very good way, in a well-crafted way, and however professionally I can, to share literally with my family, to show them how they can get out of the hole they're in that I had been in, that is strictly by virtue of being in the family. And so that's my goal, is to try to write the story that will help open their eyes to how they can get out of the troubles that just come from our background. So that's my plan, and one of my strategies is to sort of actively avoid going to a place like trope, where I have to not continue to work on my book and get sidetracked by trying to get it published. Because I really need to finish this project and get it done for my own goals. Because I don't need to get published just to get published, but I really have a reason. I mean, not that, I just mean my reason is my reason. I really want to
and that's
follow.
exactly right. Your reason is your reason.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And my goal is to make money, so I just self-publish on Kindle and charge 99 cents or whatever, and you get enough, if you get enough hits or whatever every month, they keep sending you your check. So I think that even though it's only 99 cents or whatever, it's cheap enough that enough people are gonna buy it.
And I think that becomes an interesting other topic to have for a whole different day, right? Because that could fill a whole day, is talking about Kindle and self-publishing and that strategy of going at a very reasonable price, that 99 cents, where people will go buy it. The challenge is getting it in front of enough people so that when they see it, they actually see it first, because that's the first problem is they have to know you're there for 99 cents and they have to read the summary to say, I want to read that.
Well, they have different things, like, well, I don't want to go into it too much, but they do have, like, you can put it for free for a couple days, because they
Right.
just read it for free.
But they still have to find
people
it.
see, yeah, but people see that there's new ones. They think, like, if you can do a search, like, and all the new ones, or 99-cent ones will come up. So they find it somehow with that, because I didn't advertise at all, and they find them.
Yeah. And that, again, that's a slightly different strategy. They all have a core to them, but these strategies are somewhat different. And the approach you take and what you do from that depends on what that goal is. How about anyone else? Do you have more questions?
I just have a strategy I'm going to throw out to people. It's not mine. It's something I recommend. There, on the back of a book is often about the author, or at the back of the cover, or at the back of the book is the author's picture, says about the author. First-time novelists, a lot of times when they're self-publishing, if they don't have anything else they've ever had published, they can't write that in the about the author part.
Right.
So if they have submitted stories, even short stories, and had them published elsewhere, then in the about the author section, it gives them their creds a little bit more. If they could say, so-and-so short stories have appeared in, and then they can start listing those places. So it is a strategy for authors to use to help boost their credibility for readers, especially if they're going to put their picture and their bio on the back of the cover. I did one book for a woman who was a nurse, and her bio is, Sharon is a nurse who lives in Kansas. She lives with her cat. That was it. I think she could have...
How many friends does her cat have?
So, it's just an idea.
Ellie, how many people have you helped publish books? Sounds like you know a little bit about it. How many have you helped?
40 or
That's
more.
a lot. That gives you a lot of exposure to what a lot of people are doing. How about anyone else?
Gary, I'd like to
I was hoping you would speak up.
I'd like to talk to the group. Have you heard of this tool? It's called QueryTracker.net. QueryTracker.net is a wonderful tool. It's free. The premier version costs $25 a year. QueryTracker.net is what I use to find an agent. I'm interested in finding an agent. So what I do is I go on there. First thing you'll see is a big button that says search. And there's 1,000 agents. So I put in the criteria of agent that I'm looking for. Somebody's interested in young adult, science fiction, humor, whatever it is. I put it in, spits out a list of 4 dozen agents that meet those criteria. Then what I can do is I can go and I can, each one of those agents has a link. And I can link to the agent, find out more about them. And then I can refine my 48 down to 24 maybe. And then I can rate those 24 on criteria that are of importance to me, high to low. So that when submission time comes around, after a couple months of doing this, I know a lot about who my audience is. I know why I selected this guy number 1 or this gal number 1, and why I selected this guy or gal number 10 or 20. And I'll go right down the list. And I'll submit to my favorite agent first, second, third, and I'll probably send out 3 or 4 at a time so I don't flood the market. The other thing you can do, the other thing that's helpful about this is that the tool, QueryTracker, will also have successful query letters on it. Like the agents will post the successful query letters, ones that they found were really good, and that they said, yes, please send me your manuscript. And there's hundreds of examples of that. So So if you're interested, whatever your genre is, you'll find many examples of successful query letters.
So, Bill, what you're saying is if we take one of those query letters and write a novel to match them, we should get published.
No, I'm getting there. In addition, though, you can read, the agents will tell you, that, like they said, the agents will have blogs. You can read through the link, you can see their blogs. And what they will tell you is what they're looking for. And typically what they're looking for is stuff that's not out there. You know, they're not trying to be part of the herd. They're trying to look for something that's really different, and they'll tell you what that is pretty specifically. You know, so if you're kind of a standstill, you know, and you don't know what the world wants, or if you're between novels or between short stories and you're trying to come up with ideas, you have a writer's block. It's good to spend a couple hours, go through those letters. You might get some ideas. So I think it's a very helpful tool in so many ways, and it does keep track of your submissions and your successes and your rejections and oh, by the way, everybody who uses this, a lot of people who use the service, hundreds of thousands of writers who use the service, give feedback. So all that data is available on who responds quickly, who responds nicely, who gives you good feedback, which agents give you good feedback, and things like that. So it's a wonderful tool to use, and I highly recommend it.
Anyone? Go ahead, Carol.
This is going to sound like, I guess, really simple, and probably a lot of people already do. But like as an editor, I look for, we always look for fresh stories, and I mean that sounds obvious, but really unique takes on things. And I'm trying to, I guess my point that I wanted to make is one of my goals is to just really write something really fresh, you know, and try to be more unique in the subjects you know, in the areas I write in, and I don't know, just to write more fresh, I don't know, more unique. We get a lot of stories on the same, like, spousal abuse, believe it or not, attempted suicides, you know, things you would think, oh my God, we get flooded with stories. And the stories we take are, the ones I like the most are the unique. Who takes a topic and just makes a fresh twist on it? It's like, wow. We'll even accept a story with grammar mistakes that can be fixed if it's a really unique piece. That's what we look for. And I think that's what a lot of magazines I find when I look for submissions. They want something that's really different. Take a holiday and make a twist on it. You know, send a Christmas story that's not necessarily horror, but send a Christmas story that's not really the bright side of Christmas, or send a, you know, Halloween story that's romantic, you know, whatever, you know what I mean. So that's kind of something I'm trying to do more of in my writing, anyway.
How about anyone else? Do you have another tool?
Gary,
another
I've got
perspective?
something I learned from Jonathan Mayberry, and we mention him a lot because he's been a mentor to many of the local writers, and he's the most successful writer I know, making a very good living just writing. When Jonathan was starting out, he used to reward himself and had a reward jar. He had a amount that he wanted to write every day. I have that too. Mine's very modest, just 500 words. Now, I've written as many as 3,800 words in a day, but you know, there are days when you don't have much time to write, so that's my goal. And every day he hit his goal, he would put some money in the jar. And his goal then at the end of the project, if it was a story or a novel or whatever, he takes the money out and has to buy it on something just for himself, a reward. He can't use it to pay bills. I've been using it lately to encourage myself to do submissions, because submissions, as I've said before, suck. There's so many other things you could be doing, even just plain writing, than doing submissions. It often takes me an hour, even using Duotrope, to find a place that's appropriate to submit. And I want a minimum of 25 a month. So, every time I do one in a month, I put $5 in, And so I should have $5 bills in here by the end of the month. If I don't, I have to give the money to charity. But if I have 25, then I get to keep it and use it on something I want. So that's how I'm using Jonathan's technique to encourage myself to keep submitting.
That's great. That's great. I'm not going to end the session, but it's 8:54, and sometimes people want to leave without being conspicuous. So this would be a good time to take a break and to thank our three panelists for having the bravery to come up here and talk about their project, and for all of you for the sharing you did. Like I said, we have the room until 10 or 11, so you can hang out or you can go. Really up to you. I thank you. I just remind you a couple things. One, take care of the waitress. This is the best, bar none. This is the best place to have a meeting. It is the quietest. She is the best waitress ever. It takes 1.5 of her, right? She's an assistant, but she handles the entire room. I can't tell you what happens other places I meet, but it's a disaster. Remember that when you come here, you're supposed to buy a meal. That's how we get the room. And remember to rate the meeting, please, because it'll make these three feel great, it'll make me feel great, and it'll take the next people who might show up, and they'll be able to show up. And last thing is, and I forgot to mention this, certainly the contest for work is great. In May, here's your chance to do something amazing. In May, we're doing 50-word stories. The editor from the site, 50-word stories, is going to be our guest judge, and he's going to publish the winners. So it's a double kind of a thing. You get an award from us, and you're going to get recognition from him. So think, and 50 words. I mean, it takes art and craft to do that, but it's certainly not the commitment of 5,000 words. So think about when May rolls around in participating in that as well. I thank you very much. Hang out. We'll continue to talk.
Can I make
Thank
one
you.
point before
Yes,
everyone leaves?
Liz.
Carol made me think of this, and that's, I just want to emphasize the contest again because it dovetails so nicely with our